colors here. Oh, geez, stop. Sorry. We're going to start the coffee shop early. Remember the coffee shop? I know, John, you've been out there for Meg's Daily Grind. We used to start that in mid-January. We're going to start it December 11th, so it's going to be a 12-week series, 4 days a week. When I say 2024, we started in January 24. Now we're December 24 through March 1st. Wednesday through Saturday, no Sundays this year. We've got different types of music. We're still doing the Rockford Symphony musicians, but we're going to interject a couple bands like Emily Hurd was very popular last year. Yeah, we've got Jody Beach and a couple other bands. Again, Warren Franklin and the RSO booked those musicians. We learned a couple things. Violin or any stringed instrument for 3 hours is not really great. I mean, it's really great, but it kind of puts people to sleep, even with caffeine, so we're not doing that again. We're going to do duets and trios, though, so they can play unaccompanied violin and viola is just as challenging for everybody. And then Illuminated starts December 7th, and that will go through January 5th this year. So that's my final. That's it.
Hey, are we doing some kind of light show this year?
It's the light show. That's Illuminated. Yes.
Right. That'd be nice.
It'll be fun.
Is this loud enough, everybody? Okay, beautiful. Well, thanks everyone for being here on a little bit of a challenging night, but these are like the tough Midwesterners right here. Yeah. I appreciate that. But so I got a lot of slides. There's a lot of things that happen in the course of a gardening year, and I can't cover all of it, but I focus more on garden stuff and a little bit of the stuff that I'm closer to, the tea ceremony stuff and that kind of thing. But primarily it's the construction and reconstruction and some nice little snippets here and there along the way that I throw in there. But what an extraordinary year from a weather standpoint. The whole year was kind of an anomaly, really, from the early spring and the amount of rain we had early, and then grading into like the driest October I can ever remember, the driest and warmest October. It was really extraordinarily beautiful, but from a gardening standpoint, we did more watering in October than I think we ever have, and had to be the warmest October on record. But so I'm going to get started here with just kind of where the garden was in 5-year increments ago in the past. And so we're going to start with 45 years ago, 1979. This is looking towards the east waterfall in the Pond Strolling Garden. So just to give you an idea, and Dave was a little kid running around out there and playing in a canoe and probably wreaking havoc in general, I would say. But it's just extraordinary looking back at these shots of how far this place has come.
You'll need to unlock your iPhone first. Just to confirm.
Better get on that, huh? I turned mine off already, so theoretically I won't. I'm gonna double check. Yeah. Okay. So I got a lot of slides in here, and so I'm gonna go a little bit quick, and there'll be time for a few questions a little bit later. But 1979, later in the season, and look at, this is the kind of the iconic pine that became really the symbol for the Spring Creek partners next door. That pine was an important lesson in John Anderson's understanding of what sort of some of the things that made a Japanese garden. It was a kind of an ugly, gnarly pine in the front yard. He wanted Hoichi to take it down, and Hoichi said, no, we're going to do something with it. We're going to use it in the garden, and he puts it like in the most prominent place. And so, and it's leaning too. It's not planted straight up and down. And so that kind of the crooked tree, and that sort of like you see in the garden, there's lots of trees that lean. That it's sort of like a pattern in nature it really helps give the garden the character that it has, and that particular technique is used throughout the garden. So anyway, 1979, you can see that cherry tree out there. That actually could be a willow tree that used to be there. Actually, I'm not sure. Look at where the Yukimi Idoro, the snowviewing lantern, is located. So that was moved later on. But a lot of changes. So 1979, 1984 was the first full-time gardeners were hired, and that would be Michael Elena and his brother Mark, and Jim Jolene right here, and that's Jim, the big guy over by the elevator over there, who is a great mentor of mine, and I worked very closely with him here for 10 years, actually, and then we were close friends for the rest of his life. But so this is during the construction of the Canyon Waterfall and early preparation for the guest house construction. In this picture, some really key people. There's Masahiro Hamada, who built the guest house and a bunch of other stuff here at the garden. There's Hoichi. There's Walt Gilmore. Some of you know Walt's Rock out in the garden. That is Walt. And then the Setsuko, the interpreter, that's Takahashi, who also was Hamada's assistant on the guest house construction. So actually, this is probably 1985. I might be a year off on this one, now that I think about it, because Takahashi wouldn't have been here in '84. But anyway, the guest house construction started in 1984 with the foundation. And there also the moon bridge was installed in 1984. And the rails were built by Einar Pog, and some of you know Einar, who was a major player in the construction of the guest house. In particular, all the windows and doors and shoji of the guest house were built by Einar. Anybody know Einar in here? Yeah, a few people know Einar. Really a great craftsman. And then here's the construction of the foundation of the guest house. That is a young Jeff Anderson right there. Jeff was around construction an awful lot through the years. And the construction of the pond outside the guest house started in 1984, and that's a very young Jim Jolene right there. And there is Jimmy again right there, and Hoichi. And it's hard to tell from this angle. That's a guy named Pete. Pete was a great guy. That was an assistant of Hoichi's. There's Hoichi, and that's in 1989. I started working here at the garden. So that I cut my teeth on that West Waterfall project, which is it was like a Cecil B. DeMille epic classic. It was an incredible place to be. And by the end of 1989. We had the soil stabilized with straw, and we put down a jute mat, and that's what it looked like at the end of a total of 30 days of rock setting in 1989. 1999, we're looking at actually where this towards the direction where the angels are out in the Garden of Reflection, and that's the house that used to be here on this site, the original 318 Spring Creek Road. That house was built in 1938, and that was the old Barloga, Spanish style house that used to be on the corner out there. So that's what you're looking at, and that's probably looks like fall of 1999. 2014. This few years there weren't any like major milestones in those 5-year increments, but up to 2014 we started doing some restoration in the pond strolling garden with the reconstruction of the wall behind the fishing deck under the big willow. And so some notable things, 2014 also was the year that we reconstructed the gazebo. We took it completely apart, and I put that in there not so much to show myself off, but just show the unusual structure from above that this unique vantage point gave. And this is 3 guys celebrating a really difficult and time-consuming task of putting all those shingles on that roof. Every one of those shingles is cut, has angles cut on both sides like this, so it fits in a real clean circle all the way around there. So that took us an intensive 6 days to do that.
That picture on the left, you're standing on top of the gazebo?
Yeah. Holding the camera up like this. Yeah.
4 shingles.
Before shingles. Yeah. No, it's, just relax and be aware of where you're at. That's the thing on those kind of events. Yeah, well, there's 3 guys standing on top of the gazebo actually doing like a chorus line dance right there. Exactly. 2019 was 5 years ago already. The tatami guys were here, and we redid all the tatami in the guest house and in the tea house, and it's already 5 years ago. And this is we went through a lot of beer. And Dave said, "Just get them."
Underestimated the beer budget.
Our beer budget was shot early. We ended up, they wanted American craft beer, specifically IPA. And we went through $700 worth of beer. Plus a lot of wine. It was 5 days. I mean, you spread it out. That's okay. So it was great to be with those guys. Okay, just to give you an idea how early this year was in terms of, let me back up a little bit. So in agriculture and horticulture, a way of keeping track of where things are in terms of like when plants are going to bloom and when insects are going to emerge, there's a system called grower degree days. And so you take the high temperature and the low temperature each day, add them together, divide by 2, you get the average temperature for the day. So in this case, we use a base number, it's called base 50. So you subtract 50 from whatever that number is. And if your average temperature is 60 degrees, you subtract 50 and you get 10 degree days. And then you write down 10, and then each day you add on to that until you accumulate those degrees. They're accumulated degree days. The average number, the normal number of accumulated degrees for April 3rd in Beloit, which is close enough to us to be significant statistically, is 66. This year we were at 111. Last year we were at 21. Now, here is the 30-year average of where we should be. So this is the 30-year average for May 31st is 113. So you see that in April of this year, we were almost 2 months ahead of the accumulated degrees. And so things bloomed really early in the garden. Thankfully, we opened pretty early this year so people could get out and enjoy it. And we were able to prepare the garden well because it was nice out for so early. But just to give you an idea, and so the plant world and the insect world out there are really offset. And even way into October, the number of degree days were way ahead of the normal.
Do the insects coincide with the plant?
They absolutely do. So what we can do in horticulture is like for example, when redbud blooms, pine sawfly emerges. So it's a beautiful system that everything's are linked together, and so it makes sense that when certain things bloom, then like pollinators emerge. It all works. Has for a long time. So it's just that we have found a numerical way of describing it. So that's called when a plant bloom period and an insect emergence coincide. It's called the plant then is called a synchronous phenological indicator. So the phenology, the bloom period of the plant, is synced up. Late 2023. The long process of building our horticulture support building, we were at this phase, and then we ended December, we had the walls up, weather turned, and we ran out of time. We're doing this thing basically in-house, so it's taken us a while. We're fitting it in between the gaps in our schedule with all the other things happening in the garden. We bundled it up for the winter. And we set off to the things that we could do inside, like here's Nicholas stripping bark off of sawn logs that were part of things that needed to be removed in the west parking lot when we did that project last year. So we had to cut down a couple of old oaks that were failing, and we had the logs sawn up, and we basically then Donovan and Yuli, these are the center parts of the logs, so we just slab off the rounded parts. And then we square off the center part. We do the mill does that for us, and then we cut the bevels and cut basically the mortises that the leg then fits down into. So we spent a good amount of time building a lot of new benches last year. We're always trying to elevate the game of our staff, and This year was no difference. This is, Donovan and I went and were part of a workshop in Texas, in Fort Worth, at a private garden with a pretty major Japanese garden construction process going on down there. This is the Rolex headquarters in Dallas. So if you're ever in Dallas, check it out. This guy, I think it's the owner of Rolex is a major Japanese culture aficionado and has a major collection of samurai armor. There's a samurai museum right near here. And so these walls were built by a castle wall builder, 14th generation castle wall builder in Japan. This is the same guy that built the castle wall at the Portland Japanese Garden. It's spectacular stuff. Those are all full boulders that are fit together like that. Historically, they were dry fit. They were. Look at that beautiful curve. It's a pretty extraordinary building. Yeah, highly recommend it if you get to Dallas to check it out. And here are the guys that were, some of the people that were a part of this, and actually, So this is myself and Donovan. You all know, I think most of you know both of us. This is a Japanese garden builder, a master builder named Eto from Japan. Does a lot of work in the States now with his assistant, Avram Dalton, who's an amazing person. And then there's John Powell. Many of you know John from lectures here and a pretty substantial project down the street at one of our board of director members' house, Dwayne Wingate, who's here tonight. And it's amazing to have John coming here on a regular basis. And that's actually probably the real driver behind this is Don and Akiko Miners who own that place. And Akiko is an amazing person. They both are. And they're both in her particular, heavily involved in the tea world and are really driving this Japanese garden culture at their property. So it was a pretty amazing experience. This is a tea garden that Eto has designed, and a lot of it installed, big parts of it installed with the assistance of John Powell. Pretty amazing space in a really dry climate. And there's John Powell building a type of fence that I had never done before. John is adept at that. And there's Donovan tying some knots. We helped sort all of that, these willow branches. We bundled them all up, and then we're part of installing the whole thing. At the same time, one of our other crew members, Ulysses, was in Portland working with Hoichi. He spent some time working with Hoichi on some jobs, and then pruned with Greg Affman, and some of you know Greg, who's pruned here quite a lot in the past. This is the Lebanon Hospital. Actually, it's the Best Western near the Lebanon Hospital in Lebanon, Oregon. So anybody that's out in the Central Oregon, Lebanon Hospital is extraordinary, and it's an amazing story of the power of nature in Japanese gardens to improve the outcome of people in medical situations. In this case specifically, it's a cancer infusion center. But it's an amazing story, and it's on Hoichi's website, so if anybody is interested, check it out at kurisu.com. Anyway, it's great to have our staff interfacing with people like Hoichi and Greg. Back at the garden, upon return, a lot of you know, like this old stone bridge in the outflow area of the garden. It was really getting kind of wonky. This climate really shifts things around with freezing and thawing, and sort of the digestion of mortar and some concrete. And this rock had pitched quite a lot. The stones that lead up to the bridge had also shifted. So it was getting a little bit, maybe not safe. So we took it all apart. We reset that rock in a big bed of concrete. We built actual concrete walls on both sides to reset the stone slabs on it. So I'm pretty confident that thing will be stable for a long time. There's a lot of concrete, there's steel in there. We drilled pins into rocks to hold things together, so I feel really good about that for the future. but just kind of an ongoing restoration. They're the not quite complete yet project, but the slabs are reinstalled. They're level. They don't move. They don't wobble. It's very stable. And at the same time, we tore out all those peeler poles, those wooden poles that we usually burn and blacken along the edge of that stream. And they had shifted and been heaved out of the ground after, well, that was 1984 as well that was done. So those have been in the ground for 40 years. So those were all pulled out and reinstalled in fresh concrete. Back to Texas, back to Fort Worth, a nice group from the garden, including David and Catherine and John Gleason, our COO, and myself went down there. And this is a real literati of Japanese garden people in North America, with John Powell and Eto and Avram Dalton, Asher Brown, who had a lot of articles in the Journal of Japanese Garden, or Ski Living magazine. There's Bill Castellan, who's done a lot of amazing Japanese garden work on the West Coast primarily. David Shiposh, who you recognize, and some of you know this guy, Nick Estes, who was the head gardener at the Japanese garden in Fort Worth, and we'll talk more about him a little bit later. But he was a major part of planning and making that whole conference work really, really well. So this is the kickoff party, actually, with some announcements and so forth at Don Miner's pole barn. And Catherine was there. Catherine and Rebecca from Rosecrans presented on essentially on the healing kind of work that we do here with our pathways for wellness that really developed by Randy Zimmerman, who's back there somewhere. And it's been a great program, and we continue to grow that. So so Catherine and Rebecca gave a presentation at the conference. As well as some of you might maybe saw Jennifer Gunji, Professor Kimiko Gunji's daughter. She was there and gave a presentation on omotenashi, the culture of hospitality, which was a really important presentation. Bob Downs, some of you saw his presentation here. I'll a little bit more about that later. But Bob was down there, and Dwayne and I actually we kind of popped into one of the sold out events that Bob was giving, a long workshop, and after listening to what he had to say, we're like, we got to get this guy here. He's got to come here, and we need to have him present to our staff. But really an amazing insight. Hands-on workshops down there. So this is Eto and Avram Dalton and a group of other really accomplished Japanese gardeners is putting rocks in place, and just looking at how the actual design and construction of a Japanese garden goes. And John Powell is right here telling the rest of the participants what's happening. So it's a great way for people to understand the thinking and then the technique of setting rocks in a Japanese garden. March 17th. This is one of my measuring sticks for where we are in the season. There's that much snow still frozen on the east side of the guest house, but it's whittling away. There really is. There can be at times in the past there's 4 feet of snow there. This year wasn't too bad, but it really becomes kind of a beautiful sculptural object as it sort of waxes and wanes and melts away. There's Ian out in the driveway doing detail pruning on those nice Mugo pines. So we're getting ready. We had Ramon Acosta and his crew in here resetting a rock that had fallen back by the tea house, and you can't get equipment back there, so you got to do it sort of by hand and with some ingenuity and leverage and any kind of method that you can. And there it is back up in place. It was down in this area, and so it's a tough rock to move. Without machines. It was all done with a crane in the first place, but it's hard to get a crane back in there anymore. We did some rework on the floating deck. Really needed to stabilize that thing, and it's good for a few more years now. But we're really envisioning the day when we can build a new structure there, and we hope Huichi will actually be visiting us in December. And this is one of the areas that we want to design something, possibly like a pavilion similar to the pavilion we have, except that in a way that fits into the garden very nicely. Not that the pavilion doesn't, but just sort of something that sort of augments things, maybe a little different style. Donna and Yuli working in the shop, making the posts, and then installing them. So we do a lot of different kind of stuff here. As the guys are out there nearing completion. March 23rd was the Rikuki, and the Rikuki is an honorary tea ceremony for the founder of this Urasenke Tea School in Japan, which is like really the foundation of traditional tea in Japan. So Rikyu was the founder. He was born in 1522, and currently the current Grand Master is a 16th generation descendant from Rikyu. And so we have an honorary tea ceremony for Rikyu every year that the public is able to be a part of. And there's Professor Kimiko Gunji leading that. It's really a celebration. We did a bunch of work on the steps out in the garden. And we rebuilt a lot of things. All those wooden steps were rebuilt. And we prepped it with these tubes that are still there. We'll start working on that again here soon to put a railing out there. That's been one of the areas that really needs a railing in the garden. And so we have a plan. We just gotta, and we got ourselves set up for it now. We'll just be able to sink posts into these cylinders now in a way that makes good sense. And so we're really happy to be getting that project going. A really big project this year was the North Slope restoration, and a lot of you know that the driveway up above the zigzag ridge area, that was really been failing for a long time. And when you see the cutaway here, you're going to see the original grades. But essentially, the slope is kind of cleaving off right here. Here's the original grade, and here's the original grade. There was a slight cut done in here, and then a fill done down here, and it's not it wasn't stable. So you can see these stress lines where the driveway is being stretched as the thing is sliding down the hill. It started with, I think this is a concerned looking Anthony Terrara, right there from AA Construction. And really it was kind of a design as you go kind of thing, because we had an idea of what to do, but you don't know what conditions are going to be like, and you don't know how the excavation is going to go. So this was a design as we go. You can see that the plan was to put in a big wall with a massive footing, and then return walls that would stabilize the wall. So here's the initial excavation. Excavation complete, and we're starting to pour a footing. The footing is 8 feet wide. 8 feet wide and a foot thick. About 100 feet long. And then we've got, you can see some of the footing is poured with lots of steel, and then these uprights where the return walls will be. That's Diego's dad right there. That's Anthony's dad, Diego. Oh, I wanted to illustrate right here. Let me back up. There's an archaeological find right there. You can see the strata here of where the original grade was. This is the original grade down here. And then at time there was some fill, a little bit of gravel, and then probably about 1975 or so when the Andersons bought the property, when John and Linda Anderson bought the property, and there was a bunch of fill done to make this driveway work. And so that's a pretty cool cross section right there. And underneath the railroad ties, this is like a 1975 vintage RC can. It's amazing the condition it's in after being in the ground for that long. That was probably made right here in Rockford. And then there was also a Sprite can in there. But look, it's got the pull tab, steel can. A few days on, we're pouring concrete into the footings. You can see how thick they are. And they're stepped down with lots of steel going from one to the next as it steps its way down the slope. Lots of steel inside there, and then when the concrete's wet, we jam the steel all the way down into the concrete where the walls will sit. They're just going together, a big keyway in the bottom to help keep the wall from being able to push, in order to keep it from being able to be pushed off the footing. There's Diego checking the scene out. Project progressing nicely. And then came the concrete forms for the walls. That concrete was then pumped in. So the concrete truck unloads the concrete into a hopper, and the hopper then pumps it through this hose into the wall. And then a few days later the form's coming off. And it looks like that. So we know there's going to be water percolating through the soil laterally, and we didn't want the particles in here to end up over here, causing the driveway to sink up here. So we laid this fabric down and stapled it in place, and then flopped it over into the hole. And then this all got backfilled with clean chips, so that any water that gets in there can drain down to the bottom. And there, see that's a hole right there. That's a hole right there. So the water can drain freely through the foundation from the highest level to the lowest level. This wall all along this whole chunk of wall has holes all along the bottom to let water out. So the idea is to keep the hydraulic pressure, the weight of all that water pressing on the wall, to keep that from happening. And there's a pipe for drainage from the area that'll end up being buried that allows the water out. We ended up putting irrigation pipe in there, and a big irrigation pipe for future use, with all the heads and everything ready to go. Even though we didn't have any water to go to it, we had water. The water was a pressurized water main. Our water trunk was hundreds of feet away. We did overcome that later, and I'll touch base on that. So there's the clean chips going in. And then April 1st, the eclipse happened. And that was really amazing. That was an amazing day. And a couple of the guys out there with pegboard projecting the light through the pegboard onto an object. And so each hole in the pegboard acts as a pinhole camera. And so that's an example of what the light early in the eclipse, what pegboard, that was projected onto, I think, a piece of black painted plywood. This is just fun in the garden here. Those are Laura's shoes. With lots of eclipses. Projected onto Walt's Rock. And then, who witnessed like some of these cool light? In Texas, it was a full eclipse, right? Yeah. So we were partial, but even like the overlapping leaves on trees create like an oculus, right? That's a pinhole. The overlapping leaves create pinhole cameras, and so those are all. This is just a photograph. There's no doctoring at all. That's the way it was. Everywhere out in the garden, wherever needles or leaves overlapped, that's what you had. This is through spruce trees. And there's just to give you an idea, this is also Walt's Rock. There's the kanji, and look at all those cool crescent shapes. So it's such a rare and special thing to be able to witness that. We did some shoring up of the west waterfall deck, and I put these little projects in here just to illustrate. It takes a lot to continually kind of like rejuvenate the spaces in this garden. There's so many things out there that need attention. As soon as you're done like building or rebuilding something else is queued up that it needs help. The Coin Basin area. So it's our garden logo. this basin with the, the kanji on it that translates to, I seek only contentment, or I know only what is enough. And this is very early in the garden's history, I think 1980. And most of you know that it was really kind of falling apart, and it really kind of like the logo of our garden and the reason for it, its creation, should be in better shape. And we had problems with the drain. The liner leaked really bad, the drain didn't work very well, it was really old and it had a lot of issues. And so it needed a complete rebuild. We started by, we knew that when we took all this concrete out of here that there would be some issues possibly with rocks moving, so we stabilized things and started taking it apart. Jackhammered out the concrete. Actually, the concrete was 9 inches thick in there, so it was really it was kind of a brutal job to get that out of there. But with the help of the guys from our R&R Landscape, and that's Ramon and Costa, they're great. We got it done. We took it all out. We put down the concrete, a nice a base of crushed stone, and then sand, and we put a liner on top of that. And we're just getting ready. I want to illustrate here. So some things take time, and this pipe is the new drain pipe that we actually installed in 2023. We did that when we needed to put a new pipe in for the well. The well pipe had become completely filled with rust. It's like pure iron oxide, like a creamy iron oxide. It's like art grade. I mean, it's really beautiful material, but it completely filled the pipe. So we had to make a trench over to the pond so that we could keep the pond level topped off. We have a really low flow well over there that we do that with. So while we had the trench open, we rerouted the irrigation from the coin basin so that there used to be valve boxes over there, and it's such a high detailed area for the irrigation. We wanted to get that out of there, so there was no mechanical things in that space. It should look like just a pure garden space with no visual mechanicals. And so we did that. We rerouted the irrigation around that. All the irrigation control wire was moved from right at the base of that fence behind that basin. And then we knew that we wanted to rebuild this area at some point, so while the trench was open, we put in a new drain pipe. And so then we buried it, and it sat there until the spring of this year, when we brought a new pipe out to meet that last year's work. It now has a rubber liner under it with a proper seal that the drain pipe comes through. Then on top of that liner, then we poured concrete. So it's a pretty thick layer of concrete there.
About how deep is that pond?
Actually, we keep it, right now it has virtually no water in it. It's just, well, we made it so that you can change the height of this opening with a screw-in fitting. So that if you want to have a little water in there, which is okay, you can do that just by putting in a different fitting. Right now, we keep it, it's dry, but we can adjust it. So it can be anywhere from 0 to whatever you want, just by changing the fitting. And so then the other thing, we had to take all these out of there, and you saw them already removed. But we respecting Oichi's original work, he's the one that set these stones in place. We make a template out of, lay down plastic, we index some marks on here. It's hard to see the lines, but we use a magic marker, and we trace all the rocks, and then we make 2 copies actually. And then we take 1 copy, and we lay it on the ground. And then we start removing the pieces one at a time and setting them in place where they belong on the template. And then when we're ready to reinstall it, we lay down the second copy in place, indexed to the rocks that are still there. And then we bring them over and set it on top of the plastic, and then just cut the plastic out, roll the rock over, take the plastic out, and then bed it at the right elevation. We collected moss. This is Ethan, our intern. We collected moss out at J. Carlson Growers, and by the time it was all said and done, it was a pretty fresh new look over there with some new plants. We rebuilt the fence behind there, So it's really a nice addition to the garden. We had an art installation out in the garden this year, really the first major art installation we had. A little controversial, but I thought they were pretty cool, and the shadows were excellent. In the morning, the shadows created by this stuff was fantastic. And just some of the serendipitous things that happen out there with these tight cones of emerging hosta, and then with the rain and then the drops sliding down the sides. I just love that pattern is really great. Yeah, the rainy times in the garden are fantastic. Yeah, just a few shots of some nice things that happened out there. Excuse me. Even cracks in blacktop can be nice sometimes. Here they are with redbud flowers, falling and then collecting in the cracks. There's one of the benches that Donovan and Yuli built. That was actually a bald cypress tree that we had to bring down. That was over in the location of the new horticulture support building. May 6th, David and Colleen Anderson and my wife Shelley and I, we went down to Champaign as part of the celebration of Professor Kimiko Gunji's 50 years of teaching down there. She's pretty extraordinary, and we're so fortunate to have her here. But she founded the New Japan House down there, which is an amazing cultural institution. And it was an amazing group of people there, college administration, professors, and admirers from really all over the world, actually. But we're grateful to have her, her teaching of Ikebana, and one of her students, Reiko, now teaches Ikebana here at the garden, Japanese flower arranging. And so Catherine and Noni have been students of Reiko, and then always corrected by Professor Gunji, almost every time, because you can always make things better, right? Kaizen, gradual and continual improvement. And so it's really elevated the way we can present the guest house. It looks like a real deal. And also because of the influence of Professor Gunji, Seiran Chiba, who executed all those Wake Seijaku, 4 principles of tea, that are on those scrolls on that wall right there. Those are all the work of Chiba. And she has done great things here at our summer festival in the past, and has done workshops for the public on calligraphy. She visited with her mother, and also then held a workshop here. So we're really grateful for those kinds of things. And then we got Bob Downs here, who has this idea of niwado, or do being the way or the path, like chado, the way of tea, or and so forth. Kendo, the way of the sword. And so his idea of niwado, or the way of the garden, and really focuses on what gardens can do for people, and in so many aspects of their lives. There's so many lessons in gardens, in particular Japanese gardens, that are important. Further sort of refurbishing things out there, this little stream crossing at the inner garden of the guest house, really these rocks are just sitting in mortar, sitting on top of a concrete stream. And the climate, just like I said, it really, between heaving and thawing, it just really breaks that stuff down, turns it into just like crumbly gravel. What started out as mortar or concrete can become like a pile of sand almost. And so that was really weak. We knew we had to rebuild it. And so how do we do it? You can see how much things had shifted, how loose these things were. It had to be done. And so we carefully labeled everything. We made a template, just like we did with the coin basin area. And then started taking it apart. And you can see just like how kind of gravelly this former mortar became. The little tubes, the little drain tiles that go underneath it that allow the water to move underneath that bridge. And then we disassembled it. Studied it as we went, kept very close track of where the rocks came from. We wanted to put them back, this was the work of Huichi, and we have great respect for that work, so we wanted to put it back just like it was. So before we took some things out, we drilled holes and set stainless steel pins in epoxy, so we could keep track of where things belong. There's little index marks that illustrate, like, that line goes with that pin. There's another one right there. And of course, we take pictures. We're fortunate to be able to take a lot of pictures of things in the modern world with digital cameras. But it started to look like that, with lots more pins going in that gave us good index marks. And we had that many pins in when we started to put it back together. So that's all stainless steel rod embedded in concrete with construction epoxy. And then you can see that even though these will end up being sitting in a bed of mortar, the mortar isn't the only thing that's going to hold them up. These steel rods, stainless steel rods, we set them in there and then cut them carefully so that they actually are physically holding these big chunks of stone. They came out very nice chunks. And so they were so well consolidated, we thought, let's just use them as a massive hunk. And that's what we did. And so those big hunks went right back in there. They are now sitting on stainless steel pins that then are filled in with mortar. So we're pretty confident that's going to last a long time over there. And then one of the really big projects, the Giboshi Bridge. I gotta get going. I gotta fly here, okay? I'm taking too much time. Giboshi Bridge project, which has been really planning for 10 years. And David Shiposh is the guy that we've planned that with, and he's an amazing craftsman. The bases we engineered between myself and David. They're made out of stainless steel. The difference is they'll keep the base of the post off the top of the deck, and so actually they're suspended up in the air. They're all welded together, so this is a really solid unit. There's airflow underneath the base of those now, and the way the posts enter, you can see on this line. This would be like the outer surface of the post, and it actually hangs over the edge of the base, so that the water doesn't get caught down inside there. It sheds off of the post, away from the foot. So the sections came pre-built. David and Danny Shimoda, his assistant, built those in Ojai, California, out of Alaskan yellow cedar. They brought them here and carefully, you can't tell from this, but they're scribing them to fit the posts, the new posts. And like that right there. And so they're incredibly well fit. There's Joe and Kathy standing right there. They're in attendance here tonight. They came to check in on the project with David and Danny. That's Aki Nakanishi, who's the curator of cultural events at the Portland Japanese Garden. So he's really a fantastic guy and a major player out there. One side done. I think they were here for 3 weeks. 3 weeks, yeah. And this illustrates how those sections are held on. We didn't want to penetrate into the posts, so this is a little variation from traditional style. We didn't penetrate into the posts. These are sitting on the side. They slip into those pins hanging out of that post, and then are held down by washers and nuts that pull it up tight to the post. And there's Danny carefully scribing with a chisel. And there's a scribing tool that Dodd put together. And then finally we had it all done, and between David and myself and David, it was really a long process, but we're grateful that we were able to pull it off. So we're hoping that thing lasts now for a long, long time. We did everything we could to make it last for a very long time. Art and Bloom, we were contributed there again this year. There's Donovan and Yuli and the piece that they came up with. Catherine had a piece down there, and Noni had a piece down there. I wish I had pictures of those, but I just don't. But so Anderson Gardens is pretty well represented at Art in Bloom. And there's our one of our prospects to replace myself here as I drift towards retirement. There's Nick Estes, and Nick is actually sitting at the back, right back there with his wife Lauren. And we're really grateful to have them here and welcome them here. They're a great family, and with their son David, and this was sort of like a get to know each other. I've known Nick for a long time, and really happy that he's here. And there's Nick with John Anderson and Rick Nielsen. And what Rick is, I think, saying here is that Cheap Trick and Anderson Gardens are number one. And that's what he's saying in that picture. But June, Jennifer Gunji came and gave her a motenashi, which is really a significant way of thinking about a culture of hospitality, and that's like, it really fits like the Anderson Gardens way, and so we want to everything that we can do to become that culture of hospitality. And then her mother, Kimiko Gunji, the former director, and Jennifer is now the director of Japan House in Champaign. That's her mother, and she gave a tea ceremony with the assistance of Keiko Hall, one of our longtime volunteers and Japanese language teachers. Tea ceremony as an illustration of the culture of hospitality. We have lots of interesting people coming this way. Richard Milgram and his wife Mira. Richard is probably the Western world's most prominent potter that lives and works in Japan. Really at the highest levels of the pottery world in Japanese tea culture. And so that's a major accomplishment for a Westerner. And he came through and visited. That's a little tea caddy that's made with horsehair that fires and makes that pattern. Really cool stuff. His work was beautiful. He showed some of his work here to our staff and to the Andersons. Really amazing work. Some of you might notice that the kids haven't been throwing those rocks out there, right? Boy, there's probably a lot of frustrated kids out there, but we finally, I mean, I'll bet there's a ton of those, seriously, I'm not kidding, like a ton of those rocks get launched into the pond, over the last 30 years. And now we set them in a bed of mortars. Frustrated kids out there. And Nicholas is awesome. Nicholas has been here for a long time, and he's become really an accomplished Gruner. And he's going to work less next year as well. He's kind of in my age range, and really become a skilled guy. And this is a great person to have here. July 15th, almost a foot of rain in less than 48 hours. That's the West Waterfall. That rock has debris on top of it from the water. That's how high it was. There was a lot of damage, but there's also a silver lining. Some of you know that pump box. That's if you look downstream from the Cypress Bridge down by the West Waterfall. That's a little pump house, and you can see it from the bridge. The water went all the way up to that pump house. A lot of cleanup work. There's Catherine and Ian in the west parking lot. That path, you can see how much erosion occurred. We actually removed that path because, I'm sorry about that. It was a nice path, but it was a problem path. And there's a ton of mechanical stuff buried underneath that path, and we didn't want to encase it in concrete. And so this happens too much. And so we eliminated it, and now we've got plants growing back there, and we're hoping that we don't have that problem anymore. But lots of gravel in the grass out there that had to be raked out and vacuumed. But this Walkways for Everyone?
Pathways for Everyone.
Pathways for Everyone project that started in 2019 and putting a lot of exposed aggregate concrete out there, that saved us. Like when this thing washed out in 2018, we spent like 50 grand on putting that garden back together. And this year, I think we were partially open for 3 weeks.
Oh, we were open the whole time.
This time,
Yeah.
but not in 2018.
Right.
2018 was a problem.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of loss in 2018. We did not close this year. And a lot of that's because of the people that supported this Pathways project. It worked. It did everything we wanted it to do. Made it easier for people to get around out there. The garden brings in people who are interested in a quality garden. This is the leadership team of the Biltmore Estates horticulture group. So they came here to see this garden. So great volunteers. This one, here's Randy working some detail work back there, but we're really grateful for all the work that our volunteers do out in the garden, both in the garden and in our docent crew. Summer Festival, Consul General of Japan, Chicago office, who has an 11-state territory?
10 state.
10 state.
Largest consulate district in the United States.
Mm-hmm. And so he was here. We had a special tea ceremony. Usually Professor Gunji does the tea, but our tea group under her leadership is really becoming accomplished. And so one of her students, Stephen Salerno, presented tea with Professor Gunji as a narrator. That's pressure right there. For that guy, that's pressure. The sidewalk project from the School of Medicine.
Wow.
So we have a lot of people that walk down Parkview during the Tuesday evenings. That was a pretty major deal, getting all that. That was years in the making.
2018,
But we,
sir.
2018, there you go. And then August 19th, we hired Nick, and his first day, I think it was this day. And Professor Gunji was here. There was we were able to get together with her at the guest house. And Nick jumped right into things. We're super heavy. He's got great, he trained under John Powell for many years, and we're really grateful to have him here. I think it's a great transition for the garden to have Nick here, and we'll work together through May of 2026 when I ride off into the sunrise. Back to the horse support building, we started working on that again. We had to make the beams that would hold up the gable, the rake on the gable. We made those beams, we made the round ones. There was Donovan doing that. The moon viewing tea ceremony in September with the Consul General and his wife, who is a big fan of Ikebana. And so they were here. It was a beautiful evening. There's Noni with one of her creations. Students of Reiko, who teaches the Ikebana here, had how many were there? How many pieces were there? 10 pieces. It was really great out there in the pavilion. We had a major infrastructure improvement from a horticultural angle. When we put that wall in at the north slope, we had the irrigation ready to go there, but it couldn't be fed by anything, and we ended up doing that. So just to give you an idea, we ended up putting, I should have measured how many, I gotta be 300 or 400 feet at least of new irrigation supply line, control wire for future use. While the trench is open, we put the control wire in there for the irrigation zones. We installed new zones on the north slope and along the driveway, and we have future conduits in there for any electrical projects that might happen. And this map illustrates sort of just how this one module of irrigation is. Here's the old supply. It's still there, over by the pavilion. That water goes all the way over like this, and also partway around this way somewhere. We don't know the exact path, but we added this much. So now this is one big ring of irrigation water, which is great for the efficiency and the pressure of that whole area. And we'll be able to, in time, we need to rebuild some of that old irrigation. This gives us all the potential to do that. And there it is, moving from the Stone Ridge Drive with the electrical conduit down towards the new horticulture support building. And there's Gonzo from Rainmaster. This guy has been here he's been doing irrigation here for over 25 years. Incredible at what he does. So we're grateful to have the creative ability and technical ability of a guy like that. And another volunteer, Jeff, who mysteriously appears and rakes the paths out in the garden. It's great, we never know, but you come in the morning and it's like, wow, Jeff was here. The paths look fresh. Thanks to generous patrons, we were able to replace all the pumps in the west waterfall. There's 3 major pumps back there. Originally there were 3 10 horsepower pumps, and They pump a lot of water, 1,400 gallons a minute comes out of those pumps. So we needed to replace them all, they were getting pretty tired. And so there's that process, and then we were able to get back to full flow. We were really only at about a little less than 2/3 flow for most of the summer, because we couldn't get one of the pumps, the motor was a hard one to get. We had a visit from Taka Saida and his son. Hey, where's Kaito?
I think he's taking the picture.
Man, that's it, isn't it? That's it, yeah. But there's Reiko Reyes, who's, was the former director of the Phoenix, the Japanese Friendship Guard in Phoenix, and lives in Kyoto most of the time. And there's Nick, he's on duty. We hope to at some point, Taka carved that piece right over there. That's a contemporary wine chiller, hand carved. And we're hoping that someday we can have him and his group, Linked Artisan, who do all kinds of interesting things in traditional Japanese cultural arts. We hope to figure out a way to get them here to do a program. And continued work on the beams for the horticulture support building. And then we put that all together. We built those gable ends in one module inside the garage there, and then lifted them over there into place with a crane. That was just a few weeks ago. And there's Nick attaching the rafters to the trusses, the cedar rafters. We had to do some careful cutting up there. That's a Japanese pull saw, so that the rake rafter, all the way out at the end of the gable, hanging out in the air, these beams hold that rafter up, and we had to cut those dados so that the rafter would drop in there cleanly, and then attach really in a nice clean way. And so we've made a lot of progress on that. The electrical work is going on in there. Started this week. There's Donovan putting. When you look up under the eave, you'll see that there's tongue and groove boards up there. So it'll have a good look, pretty traditional kind of a look. There's Ian as we move up the roof, and we've covered that all with plywood. It's got ice and water shield on it now, and then it's got a 3-year membrane on top of that. We'll probably do the shingles in the spring. Just one of those events that occur in the guest house, looking out on a morning, and that's the shadows of the rain chain coming through the shoji from the inside. And those are the kind of things, those like, what she calls them positive distractions, things that you don't count on, that all of a sudden are there and they grab you, and it's like, wow, that is cool. All the rain, the water dripping down the rock, those kind of things happen out there a lot. And it's part of what makes kind of the magic of a Japanese garden. The crew's been doing a lot of pruning out there in the garden. We're trying to get ahead of that so we can move quickly in the spring. One of the latest projects this is actually the water feed for the pond strolling garden for all the irrigation. This was after the flood, it got filled in, but the walls are collapsing on it. And this is one of the small things that we do. Luis excavated that all out over there. We poured a footing, and then rebar sticking out to make a wall. There's Donovan and Luis and Nick. They did that just a couple days ago. I think yesterday you guys finished it. That's yesterday. Yeah. And so we'll have a lid fabricated for that thing, and we don't think it's ever going to go anywhere. Little projects like the tile on the hip of the tea house. These are actually bedded in mud. So they mix up what it is like a rocky clay, and then they smear that on top of there. They squish the tile down on top of it. They're held. There's some copper wires that go through to help hold them in place, and then there's a little bit of mortar to fill the space under the flat tiles where they meet those field tiles. So we got a lot of work to do up there. We got the scaffold set up. You can see how wonky that bit of tile has gotten up there. It's a really hard place to access that corner, that southwest corner of the tea hut. But we're going to do that in the next couple of weeks. Just to give you an idea of what that's like, these tiles are held down by copper wire that are attached to the roof. And that was just this morning with kind of another one of those like, wow, kind of events with, we rake this, we pile up the gravel in the middle of that garden like that every year really lately, for the last several years, because of how many cool effects you get with like the physics of cold and snow, and the top of the cone doesn't hold much heat. It's but down below it's still warm. The ground holds the warmth, and so when the sun comes out, one side will melt. It's really cool. It's a great dynamic element out in the garden that really is like physics in action. And so there's lots of thanks to so many people, really foremost our guests that come here to give us the reason to do what we do. You know, all of our members and sponsors and supporters and collaborators, our garden crew who is really amazing. It's a talented group of people. Our volunteers, all of our docents, our administrative staff that supports us. I think we have a really good collaborative thing going on between all of our departments here at the garden. And we have a set of contractors that do amazing work for us here. It takes all that stuff to make this work. And so the importance of our work, and you know that almost every time I give a presentation, I like to read this because I think it's really meaningful, and it helps express, you know, the importance and why a Japanese garden works so well. And this is from Huichi Kurisu, the garden's designer and builder, his designer statement. Cyberspace, the bull market, widespread ethnic conflict. Faced with an increasingly technological and complex age, we often forget that there exists a simpler, more fundamental way of thinking and living, a way once natural to us, a way we may have forgotten. Society's affluent materialism fails to sustain our spirit. Our deepest desires, despite our possessions and accomplishments, often remain unfulfilled. Do we not find ourselves too often preoccupied with material acquisitions and success, self-satisfaction and indifference, or burdened by stress and depression? But what of harmony and beauty, calm and renewal, generosity and impartiality? To experience the Anderson Gardens is to allow thought new space, to relax, imagine, to open, and to see. A single rock arrangement by the pond, the hush of breeze filtering through the pines, tender new leaves unfolding on a lace leaf maple, the sounds of trickling water drawing one deeper into exploration around the bend. Peace. Huichi goes on to say, there is a tremendous grace and energy inherent in such ancient rhythms. At once calming and exuberant, the natural elements remind one of how it is possible to feel, to breathe, to live with inspiration, hastening the rediscovery of a self in harmony with the world, not chaotic and destructive, but full of regenerative potential. My hope is that visitors to the gardens will experience the tremendous innate power. And so we are 4 full moons away from the gardeners being out in full force out there, and I can't tell you how much we're all grateful for the support and friendship of all of you, and that we look forward to a beautiful and inspirational 2025. So I thank you for your endurance. But